Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. Now the other day I was thinking to myself, what would my life be like if I actually lived in the Star Wars galaxy? Well, based on my lack of real marketable skills and general scruffiness, I'd imagine I'd probably end up either in the lower levels of Coruscant or some smuggling outpost in the Outer Rim. And just like here on Earth, most of my acquaintances probably will be degenerates or scumbags. Not by choice, that's just the kind of people I attract for some reason. Which led me to my next thought, which is what kind of protection would I have? Maybe a DL-44 heavy blaster. But then I thought about all the times I saw Han use that thing. It's got a really large kick. And I've been to the range a few times. I fired Deagles, 44 Magnums, and even a 50 cal revolver once, and I remember how difficult it was to reacquire targets after you shot the thing. So maybe a DL-44 with its intense recoil wouldn't be the best weapon for everyday casual use. Now the problem with something smaller than a DL-44 is there's a likelihood that your blaster round will get stopped by some very basic armor. This then led me to think, why use blasters at all? How about a good old-fashioned slug thrower? If you really think about it, firearms are actually just as good as blasters in most situations, if not better. And here are 10 reasons why. The first problem with a blaster is that every round is visible, sort of like a tracer round sometimes used in military weapons. Now, I'm not saying I'm the kind of person who runs around sniping people in the back of the head, but I generally think the best gunfights are usually the ones where the other guy has no idea where you're firing at them from. Because I'll be honest, I'm a terrible shot in real life, and even in video games, I can't really hack it. And that's why I play Battlefield instead of Call of Duty. I'm all about sneaking around and shooting people while they aren't looking at me. Now, there are special stealth blasters like the DC-19, which fire an invisible blaster round. They use a highly refined Tabana gas to make a colorless bolt, but I'm sure because of the intense heat of the round, you'll still see some kind of flashing. The carbine also needs to be reloaded every 10 shots, and the Tabana gas inside of it is stupid expensive. Like, you're better off using a rocket launcher expensive. And we're not even sure if the gun is real because it is Legends. And if it were real, I guarantee you an average Joe like me would have a hard time getting it from an Imperial or Republic armory. The fact that you can see a blaster bolt and even track it with your eyes means that it's traveling extremely slow when compared to a gunpowder weapon. Some dudes at Wired, who are much smarter than me, actually analyzed a bunch of footage from Star Wars and came up with some calculations that determined that the average speed of a blaster bolt is around 78 miles per hour. That's even slower than the top speed of a DeLorean. And even at that speed, Marty McFly was still able to dodge his horny mother and prevent himself from being his own father. So I'm pretty sure unless I'm standing right in front of someone with a blaster, I have a pretty good chance of actually dodging the blaster bolt. That means in order to hit someone, you really had to lead them a lot, even at short ranges like 50 meters. This makes the blaster extremely hard to use. So maybe Stormtroopers can hit targets, as long as they aren't moving. The slow speed of a blaster round also makes a Jedi's ability to block multiple blaster rounds seem a lot more feasible. 78 miles per hour is about the same speed that the average high school pitcher can throw the ball. At that rate, even I could make contact with a few blaster bolts. Probably wouldn't get on base, but I would make contact. I figured my line of work would be pretty sketchy in the Star Wars galaxy, probably smuggling or something worse than that, so I imagine I'd run into a lot of Jedi. Especially if this is the Republic era, it's either them or those pesky judicial forces. So we've determined that a blaster bolt is actually quite slow, and it's relatively easy for a Jedi to block them. There's also the added danger of the Jedi reflecting the bolts back into your face, so while you're lying there in that Bacta tent getting your face remade, hopefully not by Dr. Cornelius Evazan, you're most likely thinking to yourself, maybe I shouldn't have used the blaster. And you're right, because a slug thrower or a firearm is the perfect weapon to use against a Jedi. We actually did an entire video about this. You can check it out right here. You see, compared to a blaster's 78 mile per hour projectile, a standard firearm is ridiculously fast. A 9mm round travels around 1,000 miles per hour, and some bullets can travel even twice as fast as that. And then there's also crazy things like railguns, but that's not even fair. At those speeds, it's not humanly possible to dodge or block a bullet, unless you're standing at least 100 yards away from the shooter. Even with a Jedi's ability to perceive incoming threats, a wide enough spread of bullets would be impossible for them to completely intercept. Plus, we're not really sure what happens when a bullet strikes a lightsaber. It might melt the round, or maybe it'll send little pieces of molten metal at the Jedi. Who knows? Now, basic modern armor is primarily made out of Kevlar. This can stop most small caliber and low energy rounds. Kevlar is an extremely tough and flexible material that is able to catch a bullet's energy and disperse it across a wider area. Sure, it still hurts like hell to get shot, and you'll probably get a huge bruise where you're hit, but at least you'll survive. But the thing is, most Kevlar vests are designed only to stop the penetration of bullets. So if, say, a medieval knight with a broadsword or a spear comes at you, well, you're pretty much screwed. Also, if someone comes at you with a crossbow. Why is this? Well, bulletproof vests are designed to stop bullets, and bullet slugs are usually made from a softer metal like copper or brass. They're also not pointy at the tip. This all prevents the barrel of the gun from being worn down after repeated use. This means when a standard bullet hits a Kevlar vest, it will deform. A crossbow, however, is designed completely different. They're aerodynamic, usually have a very pointy tip that's made out of some hardened metal, just like a sword or a spear. And even though crossbolts only move at around 200 miles per hour, the weight of the projectile combined with its cutting edge means that it could probably make it through most standard Kevlar vests. But that's okay because modern armor is designed mainly for modern weapons. Rarely do police officers ever run into individuals wielding swords, unless they're based in Florida. So basically, modern armor is not designed for lower tech weapons. We can also apply this same strategy when it comes to Star Wars. Most Stormtroopers and security personnel in the galaxy are equipped with armor that absorbs heat energy, not kinetic energy. And that's because most people use blasters. So how does a Stormtrooper's armor work? Well, when a blaster bolt hits the Duraplast outer layer, that Duraplast is supposed to reflect some of the energy and then absorb most of it and spread it across the entire body of the wearer. Now, the wearer also has a black insulation layer that's supposed to absorb more energy. And if everything's working properly, usually doesn't, that means the energy round won't kill a Stormtrooper, just knock them out. In layman's terms, this means that the Stormtroopers are wearing plastic armor with a rubber bodysuit underneath. And if that armor does nothing against rocks, sticks, and tiny Ewok fists, it'll also do nothing against a 45 ACP round. Now, it's possible that blaster ammunition, which comes in the form of Drawbacks gas, is cheaper than slug thrower ammunition simply because slug throwers are so antiquated and there's such a high demand for blasters. But let's say you're a hermit on Tatooine or a scrapper on Jakku. Bullets will always be easier and cheaper to manufacture. In general, Drawbacks cartridges are much more complicated to make and much more dangerous to make. There's also a power pack that needs to be recharged. A firearm requires none of that. Carrying around a few cartridges of Drawbacks gas and power packs is basically like carrying a bunch of grenades all over your body. Drawbacks gas is an extremely potent combustible gas and used to power everything from heaters to Star Destroyer hyperdrives. The safest way to transfer Drawbacks gas was by freezing it in heavy carbonite. Otherwise, this happens. Now, the added bonus of a slug thrower is you can fire many different types of projectiles. Besides your standard bullet, you could go full metal jacket armor piercing rounds if you encounter some heavily armored individuals. If you're a really messed up person and you want your enemies to fear you, you can always use hollow points, which shatter on impact and create a bloody mess out of human flesh. But why stop there? Shotguns and specially created rifles like the XM25 could fire all sorts of crazy larger rounds like explosive bullets or incendiary bullets. There's even a special smart airburst round that could be programmed to blow up mid-air, rendering any type of cover obsolete. Another problem with blasters that you usually won't encounter unless you're using a larger firearm is that blasters can overheat. While it takes an air-cooled machine gun a few minutes of continuous firing to overheat, blaster rifles seem to overheat relatively quickly, causing the weapon to open up and vent all of the energy. Now, this would be less of a problem if we were talking about some large crew-served weapon, but I'm not. I'm talking about some basic rifles that a lot of militaries in Star Wars use. They can overheat relatively quickly. Bullets will drop over distance. There are a lot of different factors that can affect it, including wind speed, humidity, air resistance, and even gravity. Blaster bolts face these same problems, but because the projectile is essentially an extremely hot liquid plasma bolt, it's affected by the environment around it far more than a solid projectile would. And while a solid projectile will be moved around by different factors in the environment, a blaster bolt will just eventually disperse. This is why some bounty hunters use slug throwers for long-range combat instead of blaster rounds. Plus, as we mentioned, projectiles from slug throwers are much faster. When a blaster round hits you, especially if it's a low energy blaster round or if you're wearing armor, there's a chance that it will actually cauterize itself. Now, I'm not saying this isn't painful or a horrible thing to happen, but generally I think it's a lot better than what a bullet can do to human flesh. Even a standard 9mm bullet can do some serious damage to your body, and we're not even talking about hollow points or exploding bullets. When a softer bullet hits flesh, it usually explodes and then expands outwards, which is why exit wounds are generally much larger than entry wounds. When a bullet breaks apart, there's a possibility of it striking many different other parts of your body, including vital organs or arteries. And also because bullets don't cauterize the wound, it's much easier to bleed out from this type of injury. Just like Obi-Wan Kenobi says, energy weapons are a lot more elegant, and they come from a more refined time. When Mace Windu returned to his terrible homeworld known as Harun Kal, all of his electronics, including his blasters, stopped working because of the intense humidity on the planet. Even the most rugged blasters still have sensitive electronic components inside of them, like power packs and some kind of particle beam projectors that usually has sensitive focusing crystals in it. The central components of a slug thrower, however, were usually mechanical and much more durable in all types of situations, including in a moist environment. So as you can see, guys, I really thought about this a lot, and I figured my ideal weapon, if I lived in the Star Wars galaxy, would probably be a sawed-off scattergun. The reason is, well, you can't really miss with it, and also I'm not a complete scumbag, and unless you're standing really close, it probably won't kill you, just maim you. Anyway, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something valuable. Who knows? Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button. As usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.